Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is all about the true crimes of the 2010s. You know, I have covered other decades too in my other videos, and it always seems to me as if each time period has a different vibe, you know, a kind of a theme and things which define it. And while making this video, I realized that this decade was shaped by smartphones, apps, and the internet more than anything else. In fact, more than half of the cases we'll cover are directly tied to cell phones, websites, or other internet things. Without these technologies, many of these stories might not have existed at all. And it would have been a very good thing, but all of this horrible stuff did happen, and that's why this video exists, I guess. So because of that, I thought maybe I should start the video with a story that sets the tone for this decade, and kind of shows what 2010s were all about. So without further ado, let's start the video with a case which combines everything of this time period into one story, the Slender Man stabbings. In 2014, a shocking crime happened in Waukesha, Wisconsin. A 12-year-old girl named Peyton Leutner was stabbed 19 times by two of her closest friends, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier. The girls later said they did it to please a made-up internet character called Slender Man. Peyton, Morgan, and later Anissa were friends in school. Peyton and Morgan had known each other since they were very young and often played together both in person and online. Morgan was known to have a very active imagination. She loved fantasy worlds and sometimes even said she could see ghosts in her room. While she enjoyed pretending, she struggled socially and did not have many friends besides Peyton. In 6th grade, Morgan met Anissa. Like her, Anissa was also a loner. They became close, and Anissa soon introduced Morgan to the world of creepypasta. Among these stories was one about Slender Man, a tall, faceless figure in a black suit who was said to stalk and kidnap children. Slenderman was created in 2009 as part of an online contest where people made fake paranormal photos. Over time, the character grew in popularity through online stories, videos, and even a popular horror game called Slender: The 8 Pages. By 2012, Slender Man had become an internet legend, and Morgan became completely obsessed with him. She even claimed she had seen him before, when she was only 5 years old. She started reading fan fiction about him and pushed Peyton to read too, but Peyton was often scared and didn't enjoy it. At one point, Peyton's mother tried to help her realize it wasn't real. She read one of the Slenderman stories with her and asked if any of it seemed true. Peyton said no, but added, "Morgan knows he's real." While Peyton tried to move on, Morgan and Anissa's belief only deepened. They found online posts that said people could become Slenderman's proxies or helpers if they proved themselves. According to these stories, if they did enough, Slenderman would invite them to live in his mansion in a nearby forest. The girls believed that to prove themselves, they had to kill someone, and they decided their victim would be Peyton. The plan started to form months before the attack. Originally, they thought they would kill Peyton during a sleepover the night before Morgan's 12th birthday. They wanted her death to look like she was only sleeping under blankets. But when the time came, they couldn't go through with it. The next day, on May 31st, they invited Peyton to a park. Morgan had taken a kitchen knife from home. At first, they tried to lure her into a bathroom, but Morgan froze. Finally, the girls decided to play hide-and-seek in the woods nearby. When the moment came, Morgan held the knife and told Anissa she couldn't do it unless Anissa gave the signal. Morgan then stabbed Peyton 19 times, while Anissa urged her on. The girls told Peyton to lie still and said they would go get help, but it was a lie. Instead, they walked away, hoping to reach Slenderman's mansion. Despite her injuries, Peyton managed to crawl out of the woods to a nearby road. A passing cyclist found her and quickly called 911. Doctors discovered that 2 of the stab wounds were extremely close to her heart, only the width of a human hair away. After a 6-hour surgery, Peyton survived. Police caught Morgan and Anissa later that day. During questioning, both admitted what they had done and explained that they thought Slenderman would hurt their families if they didn't go through with it. Because of the seriousness of the attack, both girls were charged as adults. In 2017, Anissa pleaded guilty and was sent to a mental health facility for up to 25 years. But she was released in 2021 under strict rules, including GPS monitoring and internet restrictions. Morgan was diagnosed with schizophrenia, the same illness her father had. She was given the maximum sentence of 40 years in a mental institution. She is now 22 and is also set for conditional release in 2025 after spending the past 7 years at the Mental Health Institute. Even during her treatment, she continued to have hallucinations and strange beliefs. Peyton's recovery was long and difficult. She returned to school later that year, but admitted she had trouble trusting people again. In a later interview, she said she still kept scissors by her bed at night, just in case. When asked what she would say to Morgan now, she surprisingly said she would thank her, because the attack, as painful as it was, made her stronger. Murder of Tim Bosma, 2013, Canada. On May 6, 2013, the life of the Bosma family changed forever. That night, 32-year-old Tim Bosma, a husband and father from Ancaster, Ontario, went out to show his pickup truck to two men who wanted to test drive it. He never came home. Tim was a kind, hard-working man. He ran his own contracting business, loved his wife Charlene, and was a devoted father to their young daughter. He was also very involved in his church. The Bosmas had decided to sell their Dodge Ram pickup because it was costing them too much to keep. They thought the worst that could happen was that the truck might get stolen. Sadly, what happened was much worse. The man behind the crime was Dylan Millard. Dylan was born into a very wealthy family. His father owned an aviation company, and Dylan grew up with every advantage. He even made the news for being the youngest person in Canada to fly both a plane and a helicopter solo. He had a bright future ahead of him. But instead of working hard and building on his family's success, Dylan went down a dark path. In college, he began using drugs. He threw wild parties and surrounded himself with people who lived recklessly. He owned stolen cars, motorcycles, and other vehicles, which he stored in his family's airplane hangar. He seemed to enjoy crime not for money, but for the thrill. He even had an industrial-sized incinerator, which he called the Eliminator. On the night of May 6, Dylan and his friend Mark showed up at the Bosma home to test drive Tim's truck. Charlene thought it was strange that they had walked up the driveway since they lived out in the country. But she and Tim didn't imagine danger. Tim left with the two men. Hours later, when he hadn't returned and his phone went straight to voicemail, Charlene called police. Hundreds of people in the community gathered to search for Tim. They became known as the Bosma Army. Charlene pleaded publicly for his safe return, begging the men to let her husband come home. Sadly, police soon uncovered the truth. They discovered that Dylan had used a burner phone to contact Tim. They also learned he had used the same phone the day before to call another man selling a similar truck. That man, however, was much bigger and stronger than Tim and scared Dylan off. He also noticed that one of the men had a tattoo on his arm that said ambition. Police traced that tattoo to Dylan Millard. When Dylan was arrested, he still had Tim's keys on him. At first, police could only charge him with theft and forcible confinement because they had not yet found Tim. But soon, a witness led police to Dylan's property, where they found the giant incinerator. Inside, they discovered what was left of Tim Bosma. It was a horrifying discovery. Tim had been murdered and then burned beyond recognition. Evidence also showed his truck was hidden at Dylan's mother's house. Blood and shell casings were later found that linked both Dylan and Mark to the crime. This case opened the door to uncovering two more deaths, those of Laura Babcock and his own father, Wayne Millard. Laura Babcock was a 23-year-old woman from Toronto. Her friends described her as full of energy and fun, always on her phone, and someone who could light up a room. She had studied English and drama at the University of Toronto and dreamed of being an actress. But Laura struggled with mental health problems, which sometimes left her without a stable place to live. To make money, she sometimes used multiple ways to earn income, like offering companionship. Even though life was tough, she wanted to turn things around and live on her own. Laura met Dylan Millard at a bar, and the two briefly dated. They stayed in touch even after their breakup. Many people said Dellen thought he was above everyone else, almost like he was untouchable. Laura also dated another man, Sean Lerner, who was the opposite of Dellen. Sean cared for her deeply, and even after they broke up, he continued to look out for her. In June 2012, Sean rented her a hotel room so she could have a safe place to stay with her dog. He even gave her an iPad as a gift. But despite Dellen warning her to stay away, Laura got back in contact with him. In July 2012, her phone records showed over 100 calls and texts between them. On July 3rd, Laura met Dellen at the subway. Her phone was last used that evening, and after that, there was no activity on her bank account, health card, or cell phone. Her disappearance was immediate and suspicious. Sean reported Laura missing, but police did not take it seriously. They told him she would turn up because of her lifestyle. When Sean suggested police look into Dellen Millard, they ignored him. Desperate, Sean started his own search. He pulled Laura's phone records and discovered her last calls were with Dellen. Still, police did nothing. What no one knew was that Dellen had been planning Laura's death. He had ordered a large industrial incinerator, and right after Laura vanished, her iPad was found renamed on Dellen's computer before being given to his friend Mark. Disturbing photos and videos were later uncovered, showing Dellen and Mark burning remains in the incinerator. Though no body was ever recovered, evidence pointed clearly to Laura being killed and disposed of by fire. In 2016, Dellen and Mark went on trial for the murder of Tim Bosma. Charlene, Tim's wife, sat in court every day as the men were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life with no chance of parole for 25 years. The next year, both men were also tried for the 2012 murder of Laura Babcock. Evidence showed her last calls were with Dellen, her belongings were with Mark, and they had used an incinerator to destroy remains. In December 2017, they were again found guilty and given life sentences. Laura's parents finally saw justice, though her body was never found. Many people believe the Toronto police failed Laura. If they had listened to Sean Lerner in 2012, Dellen might have been caught sooner, and lives could have been saved. The case of Blake Leibel, 2016, Los Angeles, U.S. Blake Leibel was a man who seemed to have everything. Born in Canada, he grew up in a very rich family. His father was a powerful real estate businessman, and his brother Cody was well known in Hollywood for owning fancy cars and being part of the party scene. Blake himself lived in Beverly Hills without a mortgage, thanks to his family's money, and enjoyed a glamorous lifestyle. He drove expensive cars, had a model wife, and was often surrounded by beautiful women. But Blake was not only known for his money. He worked as a writer and illustrator, creating graphic novels and horror comics. He even spoke proudly about his work at Comic-Con, explaining that he spent extra time making sure his art was high quality. Blake wrote and directed a comedy film called Bald, which revolved around men struggling with hair loss. It was not well received and barely released. He also worked briefly on Spaceballs, the animated series, but critics and viewers found it poorly made. Later, he moved into comics. At Comic-Con 2008, he promoted his series United Free Worlds, which featured strange plots like aliens riding dinosaurs. He sounded confident in interviews, but the project did not become popular. In 2010, Blake co-created Syndrome, a darker, more serious graphic novel. The story followed a doctor who wanted to cure evil. The doctor set up a fake town filled with actors, freed a serial killer with his memory erased, and then observed him. The book explored the idea that evil is not a force, but a syndrome. It was violent, filled with blood and disturbing imagery. Few noticed at the time, but parts of the book seemed like a preview of what Blake would later do in real life. Through his brother's Hollywood connections, Blake became friends with famous actors and joined the underground poker scene known as Molly's Game, where stars like Ben Affleck and Tobey Maguire played. His brother Cody also introduced him to Amanda Braun, a model who later became his wife. Together, Blake and Amanda had a child and lived what looked like a perfect life. However, trouble began when Blake got involved with a woman named Iana Cassian. She too became pregnant and gave birth to his baby. Suddenly, Blake was living a double life, a wife and baby at home, and a girlfriend with another newborn child across town. Joanna was born in Ukraine, had studied law, and worked as a tax prosecutor. In 2014, she moved to Los Angeles to try modeling and to build a new life. After their baby was born, Blake's behavior grew controlling and abusive. He became jealous of the attention Joanna gave their baby. He demanded intimacy from her and threatened to find other women if she refused. Joanna, who depended on him, gave in to his demands. Her mother, Olga, had moved from Ukraine to help care for the baby, and she later said Blake wanted to control everything Joanna did. That same month, Blake was accused of assault by another woman he was having an affair with. Joanna bailed him out of jail for $100,000, but after learning of the affair, she moved in with her mother. On May 23, 2016, Joanna and Olga went shopping together when Blake began sending Joanna constant text messages. Worried, Joanna rushed back to him. This was the last time her mother ever saw her alive. After some time, Joanna's mother became worried after not hearing from her daughter. She called the police, who went to check on her. When officers arrived at his apartment, the door was barricaded. Inside, they found a scene so disturbing that it shocked even experienced detectives. Blake was in the bedroom, and with him was Joanna's body. The autopsy revealed horrific details. He tortured her for up to 8 hours, and she was alive through most of it. The things that were missing were her scalp, an ear, half of the face, and also all of the blood in her body. Also, there were many bruises and bite marks, too. The crime scene was filled with trash bags containing these parts. What made it even more chilling was how much the crime seemed to mirror Blake's writing. In his novel Syndrome, he described disturbing ideas about torture, killing, and blood. Some people in the comic world who had worked with him said they had always felt uneasy about his imagination. They remembered how he would casually bring up dark and violent thoughts. One insider recalled Blake describing graphic scenes at a party as if it were normal conversation. The similarities between his fictional stories and what happened to Joanna made many believe that Blake's art had crossed over into his real life. Even one of his drawings showed blood dripping from a woman's hand with the words, "In the end, we all become monsters." For investigators and the public, it seemed that Blake himself had become exactly that. He was found guilty of first-degree murder, torture, and aggravated mayhem. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Dmitry and Natalia Baksheev, 2017, Russia. In September 2017, shocking news came from Russia. A couple was arrested for murder and cannibalism. It was said they may have killed as many as 30 people. The story quickly spread because of the horrifying details that came out after their arrest. The man's name was Dmitry Baksheev, born in 1982. His early childhood was hard. His parents were alcoholics and could not take care of him, so he grew up in an orphanage. Later, a couple adopted him and gave him a home. For a while, life seemed normal, but when his adoptive mother died from cancer, everything changed. His adoptive father became violent and threw him out of the house. Dmitry became homeless, moving from place to place. Soon he turned to crime and was arrested for robbery. He spent 2 years in prison. When he got out, Dmitry found work at a construction site. He was quiet and often kept to himself. He spent time in bars but didn't drink. He preferred the company of alcoholics and addicts. It was during this time that he met Natalia, a woman 7 years older than him. Natalia had also faced many struggles. Born in 1975, she lost her mother young but was raised by family and even studied to become a nurse. She later married a military officer and had a child with him, but her husband died. After his death, she turned to alcohol and drugs. Her life went downhill and she often lost jobs. Natalia and Dmitry met in a bar, started dating, and eventually moved in together. Life was easier since Natalia had a room in a military dormitory left by her late husband. After some years, they got married. Her son eventually moved out, leaving the couple to live on their own. But behind closed doors, something dark was happening. On September 11, 2017, construction workers in Krasnodar found a lost phone on the street. They opened it and were shocked. Inside were photos of a man posing with severed human body parts, even holding a woman's head. Horrified, they called the police. The phone belonged to Dmitry. Police raided his home and discovered a nightmare. Human remains were everywhere. body parts in jars, in the freezer, and even in the kitchen pans. They also found a notebook with recipes for cooking human flesh, written by Natalia. There were also videos showing how to cut up bodies. One of their victims was a woman named Elena Vashrusheva, a 35-year-old waitress who lived nearby. Police believe Natalia became jealous of her and told Dmitry to kill her. He stabbed her to death, and together they cut up her body. Some of her remains were later found in the couple's apartment, even in cooking pots. Locals recalled strange encounters with the couple. A shopkeeper once saw blood dripping from Dmitry's backpack. Neighbors described them as dirty, aggressive, and drunk most of the time. Some believed Natalia had been using human meat in pies she sold to students, and even offered to restaurants. During questioning, Dmitry at first denied everything, but later admitted to killing Elena. Natalia confessed more, saying they had killed up to 30 people over the years. Police, however, could only confirm a few murders. In 2019, Natalia was sentenced to 10 years in prison and extra time in jail. Dmitry was given 12 years in a maximum security prison, but he died in 2020, just 1 year into his sentence. The true number of their victims remains unknown. Police found jars of human flesh, slices of skin, and many photos of different people, but officially, only a few deaths were confirmed. Grant Amato and the Camgirl Obsession, 2019, Florida, U.S. Grant Amato was born on May 20th, 1989. He was the youngest of 3 boys. His mother, Margaret, had her first son, Jason, from another relationship, and her husband Chad adopted him when they married. Together, Margaret and Chad had 2 sons, Cody and Grant. Cody and Grant were very close. They looked alike, acted alike, and spent most of their time together. Both enjoyed video games and computers, but Grant had another interest: guns. While the family did own firearms, Grant took a much stronger interest in them than anyone else. After high school, Grant followed in Cody's footsteps and studied nursing. But while Cody was responsible and successful, Grant struggled. In 2018, Grant was fired and arrested after being caught stealing powerful drugs from the hospital where he worked. He gave these drugs to patients even though they could be very dangerous. His family helped protect him from serious charges, but after that, his life started to fall apart. Without a job or direction, Grant spent all his time online. He pretended to live a successful life, claiming he was a big Twitch streamer and owned nice cars, but none of that was true. He was lonely and felt stuck living with his parents in his late 20s. Then he discovered a model online named Sylvie, who lived in Bulgaria. She worked on a video chat site where people had to pay money to watch her or talk to her. Sylvie charged almost $90 per minute to chat, and Grant spent hours watching her every night. Soon, he spent more than $200,000 on her. Since he wasn't working, he stole money from his father and brother to keep paying for her. Grant believed Sylvie was his girlfriend, but she was only interacting with him for the money. When his family found out, they were shocked. Chad had already taken on heavy debt to help Grant after his arrest, and now he saw his son wasting thousands of dollars. The family fought constantly about it. They sent Grant to a treatment center for internet addiction, but he dropped out after only 2 weeks. His parents then gave him strict rules. He had to get a job, pay his own bills, and stop talking to Sylvie. Grant didn't listen. By January 2019, the tension in the home was unbearable. On January 24th, Cody didn't show up to work. His coworkers knew something was wrong because of how reliable he was. Police went to the Amato home and made a terrible discovery. Chad, Margaret, and Cody had all been shot to death. Investigators quickly suspected Grant. He had recently stolen one of Cody's guns, and he was the only one with a clear motive. Autopsies showed that his parents died first, and Cody hours later after returning from work. The scene had been staged to look like Cody did it to himself, but the evidence pointed to Grant. After the killings, Grant even used his father's fingerprint to access his bank account and spend money online. At trial, the story became even clearer. Witnesses described how much money Grant had stolen, how angry the family had been, and how Cody had feared that his brother might kill them all. The jury found Grant guilty of 3 murders. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Valerie Reyes, 2019, New York, U.S. There are few things more frightening than being afraid of your own death. Sadly, this was something that 24-year-old Valerie Reyes told her mother about shortly before her life was taken. On the night of January 28, 2019, she called her mom, Norma, and said she was very anxious and scared. Valerie said she felt like someone was going to kill her, but when asked why, she couldn't explain. She didn't name anyone and said she just didn't feel safe at home. Her mom tried to calm her down, and eventually they said goodnight. But that would be the last time Norma ever spoke to her daughter. Valerie was born on April 9, 1994 in New Rochelle, New York. She grew up with her parents, Norma and Sal, and her 3 younger siblings. As the oldest, she was protective and caring toward her brothers and sisters. She was small, about 5 feet 3 inches tall, with black hair, brown eyes, and a tattoo sleeve on her arm. Friends described her as kind, gentle, and always willing to help others. She worked at Barnes & Noble for almost 3 years, where many people in the community knew her. Her real dream, though, was to become a tattoo artist. She loved art and had a bright future ahead of her. Valerie was also the kind of person who loved children and made people feel comfortable around her. At times, she struggled with anxiety and depression, but she managed to keep moving forward in life. On January 28, 2019, Valerie called her mom, Norma. She sounded nervous and admitted she felt paranoid. She said, "I'm scared someone is going to murder me." Her mother tried to calm her down, but Valerie couldn't shake the feeling. That night, around 11:35 p.m., she texted a friend saying she was tired and going to bed. That was the last message anyone received from her. The next day, she didn't show up to work. This was very unusual because Valerie was always responsible. Her family and friends began to panic when she didn't answer her phone. On January 30th, she was reported missing. Flyers and social media posts spread quickly, and the community came together, hoping she would be found safe. Days passed with no sign of Valerie. Then, on February 5, 2019, highway workers in Greenwich, Connecticut noticed a large red suitcase by the road. Inside, they found something horrifying: the body of a young woman. Her hands and feet were tied, her mouth was covered with tape, and she had head injuries. The woman was quickly identified as Valerie Reyes. Her family was heartbroken, and the community was in shock. Valerie's bank account showed money being taken out the morning after she disappeared. Surveillance cameras caught a man withdrawing money using her card. The man was driving a rented Honda CR-V. Investigators traced the car to Javier Enrique de Silva Rojas, Valerie's ex-boyfriend. Javier was born in Venezuela in 1995 and came to the United States in 2017. He overstayed his visa and lived in Queens, New York. He worked in restaurants and spent much of his time playing video games and watching horror movies. He met Valerie in early 2018 on a dating app. They started dating quickly, but Javier became very attached and controlling. He posted often about how much he loved her, even making strange comments about her. By April 2018, Valerie broke up with him. He wanted to move in, but she wasn't ready, and she felt uncomfortable with his behavior. Even after the breakup, Javier still had strong feelings for her. Investigators pieced together the timeline of January 28 to 29. While Valerie was telling her mom she felt scared, Javier was renting a car and heading to her home in New Rochelle. Just after midnight, he arrived. An argument took place, and at some point, Javier attacked her. Valerie was injured and bruised. He tied her hands and feet, taped her mouth, and forced her into a suitcase while she was still alive. At around 3 a.m., he used her fingerprint to access her phone and bank account. He withdrew $5,000 from an ATM, not realizing the camera was recording him. He then drove to Connecticut and left the suitcase by the roadside before returning home. Over the next few days, he kept taking money from her account, selling her iPad, and buying new electronics, all while her family was desperately searching for her. Police soon tracked the rental car to Javier. On February 11, 2019, they arrested him. He had Valerie's ID and bank card with him, and his DNA was found on the suitcase and her body. At first, Javier claimed her death was an accident, saying she fell and he panicked. but the evidence, her being tied up, taped, and stuffed into a suitcase, proved otherwise. The medical examiner confirmed that Valerie died from asphyxiation, meaning she could not breathe. In February 2020, Javier pleaded guilty to kidnapping that resulted in death. In September 2021, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. After serving his time, he will likely be deported back to Venezuela. The murder of Valerie Reyes was senseless and cruel. She was a young woman with her whole future ahead of her, full of dreams, love, and creativity. Her fear on that final night turned out to be heartbreakingly real. Joanna Dennehy, 2013 UK. Joanna wasn't born into a broken home or raised in chaos. In fact, she grew up in a stable middle-class family. She was smart, well cared for, and her parents hoped she'd go to college and live a successful life. But things changed when she was 16. Joanna ran away from home and never returned. By her late teens, she had 2 children, both of whom she abandoned. She fell into drug use, crime, and sometimes sold her body for money. While most troubled teens grow out of rebellion, Joanna only sank deeper into violence. In March 2013, at 27 years old, Joanna went on a 10-day killing spree. She even said she didn't want to hurt women, especially mothers. Despite her hatred of men, she convinced 2 male friends, Gary Stretch, who was over 7 feet tall, and Leslie Layton, to help her. They later claimed she manipulated them with her personality. Joanna, however, seemed to enjoy the control she had over them. She often compared herself to violent movie characters and wanted to be like Bonnie and Clyde, dreaming of killing at least 9 men. Her first victim was her roommate, 31-year-old Łukasz Slaboszewski. After stabbing him, she left his body in a ditch near Peterborough. Days later, she killed another roommate, 56-year-old John Chapman, dumping him in the same area. Soon after, she murdered Kevin Lee, her landlord and lover. In a disturbing act, she dressed his body in a woman's dress before leaving him in a ditch as well. But Joanna wasn't done. With Gary driving her, she traveled to Hereford, where she stabbed 2 strangers, John Rogers and Robin Bereza, who had simply been walking their dogs. Both men survived, though seriously injured. Joanna even stole one of their dogs, showing more concern for the animal than her victims. Joanna loved the attention her crimes brought. She bragged, joked, and even sang Britney Spears songs after one of the murders. When news of her killing spread, she reportedly danced with joy. Police eventually caught her, and during questioning, she admitted everything without remorse. She laughed, flirted with officers, and acted as though the murders were a game. She was sentenced to life in prison, a punishment extremely rare in the UK, especially for women. Only a handful of women, including infamous killers like Rose West and Myra Hindley, have ever received such a sentence. Even behind bars, Joanna continued her reckless behavior. She threatened to kill Rose West, forcing authorities to move west to another prison. She was diagnosed as a psychopath with severe emotional disorders. She even planned a prison escape by plotting to kill a guard and use their fingers to open security doors. But this was stopped before it happened. She also filed a lawsuit against the prison system, claiming solitary confinement was a violation of her rights. Unsurprisingly, the court dismissed her complaint. Joanna's love life in prison drew attention as well. She exchanged letters with men outside, began relationships with prison guards, and later tried to marry another female prisoner. Former partners described her as manipulative, proud of her crimes, and completely without remorse. Elizabeth Thomas and Tad Cummins, 2017, U.S. In 2017, a case shocked people across the United States. It involved a 50-year-old teacher named Tad Cummins and his 15-year-old student, Elizabeth Thomas. Tad was a married health science teacher at a school in Tennessee, and Elizabeth was one of his students. On January 23, 2017, a 12-year-old student saw something unusual. They said Tad gave Elizabeth a kiss on the lips during class. The student told the school, and the school then contacted the sheriff's office. Detectives spoke to the student and learned that 2 kids had even confronted Tad about his actions before reporting it. Tad had defended himself, saying he loved his wife, but admitted that Elizabeth sometimes went to church with him and his wife. Elizabeth herself was questioned. She admitted she was in the classroom that day. Even so, Tad was told by the school to avoid contact with her, and Elizabeth was removed from his class. But soon after, Elizabeth was seen in Tad's classroom again. By early February, Tad was suspended from teaching. Around that time, he also took out a loan of $4,500, saying he needed the money while he was suspended. On March 13, 2017, Tad told his wife Jill that he needed her car for a job interview. That night, Jill found a note from him saying he was actually leaving for Washington, D.C. to clear his head, and asked her not to call police. Elizabeth's father grew worried when she didn't come home that same evening. He called the police. The next day, Jill also contacted the police, saying Tad had left with clothes, money, and 2 handguns. Investigators later found out Tad had also picked up medication for erectile dysfunction and booked a hotel room in Oklahoma City with 1 bed. It was clear he had been planning something. On March 14th, the school fired Tad. He was added to Tennessee's list of most wanted fugitives, and an Amber Alert was issued for Elizabeth. The FBI joined the search because the case had crossed state lines. Police found that Tad had searched online for teenage marriage before he left. Elizabeth even changed her Instagram profile to say wife. Surveillance cameras soon caught them in Oklahoma. At a Walmart, they were seen buying razors, chocolate, and personal lubricant. After this, though, no more sightings were confirmed. The story was now all over the news. Photos and videos of Tad and Elizabeth were shown nationwide, and people were urged to call police if they saw them. More than a month later, in Northern California, a man named Griffin Barry noticed a couple staying nearby. They introduced themselves with fake names. Tad called himself John, said he was 44, and claimed Elizabeth, now called Joanna, was 22. They said they had lost their home in a fire and had no money. Griffin gave them $40 and some gas. They said they wanted to live at Black Bear Ranch, a commune in California, but within 2 days, they returned. Griffin then let them stay in a small cabin if Tad would help him build a rock wall. Neighbors became suspicious. The car had no license plate. Tad did all the talking for Elizabeth, and she only whispered in his ear. Soon, Griffin saw the Amber Alert and realized who they really were. Instead of confronting them, he called the sheriff. The next morning, when Tad came out to work, they arrested him without a fight. Elizabeth was found nearby. Reports say she was both laughing and crying at the same time. She was healthy, but experts worried about her emotional state. On April 21, 2017, Elizabeth was reunited with her family. Tad was charged with kidnapping, inappropriate contact with a minor, and transporting a minor across state lines. Just the federal charge of taking a minor across state lines meant he faced at least 10 years in prison. Tad's wife, Jill, who at first had begged him to come home, soon filed for divorce after 31 years of marriage. Elizabeth's family said in court that Tad had been manipulating her for months. They explained that she was scared of him and once even hid from him at her fast food job. In Tennessee, the age of consent is 18, so even if Elizabeth had agreed to go with him, it would not matter legally. Tad was 50 and she was 15, far too big of an age difference. Many believe Tad used his position of power as her teacher to take advantage of her trust. Elizabeth came from a large family with 9 siblings. Some people think that made her more vulnerable to the attention Tad gave her. Others say Tad himself had problems in his past, but nothing that clearly showed he would do something this serious. Thankfully, the case ended without deadly violence, even though Tad had taken guns with him. Today, Elizabeth is safe with her family, though she may face a long road of healing. Estibaliz Carranza, 2010, Vienna, Austria. On the outside, Estibaliz Carranza looked like a normal young woman. She ran an ice cream shop in Vienna, Austria, and customers thought she was sweet and friendly. But behind this friendly face was a dark secret hidden in the basement of her shop. What people later discovered there shocked the whole country and showed that looks can be very deceiving. Ice cream usually reminds people of happiness, summer days, family trips, and small joys in life. But in this case, ice cream was tied to a chilling true story. Estibaliz was born in Mexico City in 1978. When she was only 5, her family moved to Spain and settled in Barcelona. Her father, Armando Lopez, was a writer who was quite well known in Spain for his books about shamanism. But behind closed doors, Estibaliz said her father was controlling and strict. From a very young age, she began having violent thoughts, even imagining harming her father. These dark ideas stayed with her as she grew older. During her college years, she had a boyfriend for 5 years, but instead of love and care, she felt like he treated her as his property. Eventually, the relationship ended when he told her he wasn't serious about her, even though he had already proposed before. This left her bitter and angry, and she even thought about ways to hurt him, such as cutting the brakes of his car. After her studies, Estibaliz left Spain and went to Germany. She worked as an au pair, a live-in helper, and later got a job at an ice cream shop. There, she met a man named Holger Holtz. In 2002, they got married and moved to Berlin. But the marriage quickly became toxic. Holger was controlling, took her money, and even held onto papers that she needed to return to Spain. He also abused her emotionally and physically. Estibaliz later returned to working in an ice cream shop, but even her boss there treated her badly, not even letting her use the bathroom freely. All this made her angry and fed the violent thoughts in her head. In 2005, Estibaliz and Holger moved to Vienna and opened an ice cream shop together. But Holger continued to control her and took most of the business profits. Estibaliz fell out of love with him and began seeing another man, an ice cream machine salesman named Manfred Hinterberger. On April 17, 2008, things finally snapped. That evening, after a long day of insults from Holger, Estibaliz picked up a pistol and shot him 3 times while he was distracted playing video games. Holger died instantly. But then came the big problem: what to do with the body. First, she tried to burn it, but the smoke was too much. So she bought a chainsaw, made many pieces of him, and froze them. Later, she put the pieces into ice cream tubs, filled the tubs with concrete, and hid them in the basement of her shop. When people asked where Holger was, she calmly said he had moved to India, and people believed her. At first, her new relationship with Manfred seemed better. He even invested money into her ice cream business. But soon, he also started to control her. He forced her to get cosmetic surgeries, insulted her, and finally told her he did not want children with her. This left Estibaliz heartbroken and angry once again. On November 21st, 2010, after they returned from a trip, she carried out another carefully planned murder. She waited for Manfred to fall asleep, covered the room with plastic sheets, and shot him in the head 4 times. Just like before, she cut up the body with a chainsaw, placed the pieces in concrete-filled tubs, and stored them in her shop's cellar. In June 2011, workers in the building where her shop was located were fixing a broken pipe. While doing so, they discovered the tubs of concrete. To their horror, human body parts were inside. Soon after, police realized the remains belonged to both Holger and Manfred. When Estibaliz learned that the remains were found, she panicked. She emptied her bank account, packed her things, and tried to run away. She first went to Italy and stayed with strangers, even confessing parts of her crimes to one man. The police caught her a few days later and sent her back to Austria. At her trial in 2012, psychiatrists described her as extremely dangerous and diagnosed her with a serious personality disorder. They said she often placed herself in relationships where she was controlled, but once she grew tired of it, she justified murder as her way out. During the trial, she showed almost no emotion. When asked why she didn't cry, she replied that crying would only seem fake. On November 22, 2012, she was found guilty of murdering both men and was sentenced to life in prison. While in prison, Estibaliz became somewhat of a media figure because of the shocking nature of her crimes and her appearance. She even had a child with another inmate and later married him, though they separated quickly. Because she was considered too dangerous to be held with other women, she was eventually moved to a men's prison. Even today, people remember her case as one of the most disturbing in Austria. She seemed like a kind woman running an ice cream shop, but beneath that innocent surface, she carried out brutal crimes that shook everyone who heard about them. Zahra Baker, 2010, North Carolina, U.S. Elisa Baker was born on June 6, 1968, in North Carolina. Her parents worked hard in textile mills and furniture factories. From a young age, Elisa showed signs of lying and manipulating people. As a teenager, she often rebelled against her parents. Her mother was strict and sometimes used physical force, while her father was more relaxed. In high school, Elisa was popular, but she dropped out before graduating. Between 1985 and 1998, she went through marriage after marriage, sometimes without even divorcing the last man. At one point, she had 3 husbands at the same time. Many of the men she chose had physical disabilities. She would harm them emotionally and financially, then leave them. By 2008, Elisa was in serious trouble. She had unpaid bills, legal judgments against her, and had lived at over 40 different addresses in just 7 years. She moved often but could not escape her problems. Eventually, she decided to move far away, to Australia. Meanwhile, Zahra Baker was born in Wagga Wagga, Australia, on November 16, 1999. Her parents were Adam Baker and Emily Dietrich. After Zahra's birth, her mother suffered from depression and gave custody to Adam. Adam and Zahra later moved to Queensland, where Adam worked at a sugar mill. Zahra faced many health struggles. She was diagnosed with bone cancer in 2005 and later lung cancer. Part of her left leg had to be amputated, and she lost some lung tissue. Chemotherapy also damaged her hearing, so she wore hearing aids. Despite this, Zahra fought bravely and eventually went into remission. In 2008, Adam met Elisa online. Elisa traveled to Australia, and they quickly married, even though she was still married to someone else at the time. Soon after, Adam, Elisa, and Zahra moved to North Carolina in the United States. Zahra attended school for a short time, but teachers became worried about possible mistreatment at home. Elisa pulled Zahra out of school, saying she would homeschool her. Child Protective Services visited the home several times due to complaints. Elisa already had a history with social services because of issues with her biological children. On October 9, 2010, Elisa called 911 to report a fire near their home. Later that day, Adam also called 911, saying Zahra was missing. He claimed he found a ransom note demanding $1 million. However, the note was confusing. It seemed meant for their landlord, not them. Police searched the home and vehicles. Dogs indicated the presence of human remains, and Elisa was arrested. While in jail, she admitted to writing the ransom note. Elisa told police that Zahra had died suddenly from illness on September 24, 2010. She said Adam turned her into pieces, and that they both disposed of the remains. But phone records showed Elisa's phone was near the areas where Zahra's remains were found, while Adam's was not. Police believed Elisa acted alone. In 2011, Elisa was charged with second-degree murder. She eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 14 to 18 years in prison. She also faced drug charges and received more prison time later. Adam was not charged with murder but was convicted of other crimes like fraud. Elisa gave interviews later, claiming she tried to save Zahra with CPR and that she was not a monster, but her behavior told another story. Investigators believe Elisa saw Zahra as an obstacle to her own life goals. Zahra's illnesses may have brought her sympathy and attention, which made Elisa jealous. Zahra Baker had a life filled with pain and struggle. She faced serious illnesses, hearing loss, and constant challenges. Despite her courage, she ended up in the care of Elisa Baker, who betrayed her trust in the worst way. Sian O'Callaghan, 2011, UK. On the 18th of March, 2011, 22-year-old Sian O'Callaghan went out for a night with her friends in Swindon, Wiltshire. She was a lively, happy, and caring young woman who loved her family deeply. Born on June 3, 1988, Sian grew up as a bubbly girl who always looked after her younger siblings. After leaving school at 16, she briefly tried college but soon found work as an office administrator. One Friday night, she and her friends visited local pubs before ending up at Suju nightclub. The club was only half a mile from the flat she shared with her boyfriend, Kevin. Sian planned to enjoy her weekend after a long week of work. In the early hours of Saturday, March 19th, Sian left the nightclub. She was last seen on CCTV walking down a road that would have led her home, but she never made it. By the next morning, her family grew concerned. Kevin noticed she hadn't come home, wasn't answering calls, and wasn't active online. At first, her mother, Elaine, tried to stay calm and left messages, but by mid-morning, Kevin reported Sian missing to the police. This was completely out of character for her, and everyone feared something serious had happened. Detective Superintendent Stephen Fulcher took charge of the case. Police spoke with Kevin and her friends. Kevin said he had called and texted her around midnight and again at 3:30 a.m., but got no reply. Her friends told officers that they lost sight of her around 2:30 a.m. and assumed she had gone home. The police then turned to CCTV footage. Cameras showed Sian leaving Suju and walking alone. A few cars drove past her, but then a dark-colored Toyota with taxi markings stopped right beside her. Hazard lights flashed. After a few minutes, the car drove off, but Sian was no longer in sight. From that moment on, she vanished from all cameras. The police quickly believed Sian had been taken into that car. The search for her intensified. Appeals were made on TV, and the family gave emotional statements begging for her safe return. An anonymous donor even offered 40,000 British pounds as a reward for information. Soon, police identified the car. A number plate scan revealed it was a dark green Toyota Avensis belonging to Christopher Hallowell, a 47-year-old taxi driver. Though he had no criminal record, his behavior raised alarm. Investigators also tracked Sian's phone. At 3:30 a.m., it pinged near Savernake Forest, about 15 miles away, far too far for her to have walked. This suggested she had been driven there. Hallowell's taxi GPS data showed suspicious gaps. He had turned off his system around 2:30 a.m., even though CCTV caught him still driving in town. Days later, his GPS placed him near Sian's home again. His actions were becoming harder to explain. On March 24th, police arrested Hallowell outside a supermarket after noticing he had bought large amounts of painkillers. Instead of taking him straight to a station, Detective Fulcher drove him to a remote spot, hoping to keep him talking. Eventually, Hallowell cracked. He led police to Sian's body, hidden down a steep slope in the woods. She had been stabbed in the back of her head and neck. It was likely she had thought she was getting a safe lift home, but once in the taxi, she had no escape. While showing police the site, Hallowell suddenly said, "Do you want another one?" He then revealed where he had buried another woman, 20-year-old Becky Godden, who had gone missing in 2003. In 2011, Hallowell was sentenced to life in prison for Sian's murder. In 2016, he was also found guilty of Becky's murder. He showed no remorse, even smiling in court as his sentence was read. He is now serving a whole life order, meaning he will never be released. Kimberly Proctor, 2010, British Columbia, Canada. In 2010, a tragic case in Langford, British Columbia, shocked the whole country. Two teenagers, Cruz Wellwood, 16, and his best friend Cameron Moffat, 17, were responsible for the loss of a young girl named Kimberly Proctor. Cruz and Cameron were very close friends. They spent much of their time online, chatting on MSN and playing the popular video game World of Warcraft. Both boys had troubled lives. Cruz's father was already in prison for a serious crime, and Cruz himself often skipped school and got into small amounts of trouble. Cameron had a difficult childhood too. He had learning problems, struggled with ADHD, and found it hard to fit in. He was known to get angry easily and did not do well in school. The two boys met back in 5th grade and quickly bonded. As they got older, they shared the same interests and habits. Kimberly Proctor, born in 1993, was a kind and caring girl. She loved animals and had many pets, including rabbits, lizards, and cats. Sadly, she had a hard time in school because of bullying. She also struggled with attention difficulties, so her parents transferred her to Pacific Secondary, a smaller school where she could get more support. Cruz and Cameron were also students at Pacific Secondary, and that is where they became friends with Kimberly. Kimberly had recently gone through a breakup with her first boyfriend and relied on her friends for support. She chatted with Cruz and Cameron online, like many teenagers did. At times, Cameron expressed that he liked Kimberly, but she did not feel the same way. She was closer to Cruz, often turning to him when she needed someone to talk to. While Kimberly was working hard to finish school and planning to volunteer at a local wildlife center, Cruz and Cameron were moving in a very different direction. They were not focused on positive goals, and instead were spending more time online talking about unhealthy ideas. On March 16, 2010, Cruz even told a friend online that he was thinking about hurting someone. The friend did not believe him and brushed it off. The next day, Cameron sent Kimberly upsetting and threatening messages. Hurt by this, Kimberly turned to Cruz for comfort, not knowing he was secretly part of the problem. On March 18, 2010, Kimberly left home in the morning, telling her family she was going to babysit. Instead, she met up with Cruz and Cameron at the bus exchange. Tragically, that was the last time her family saw her. The next day, after Kimberly did not return home, her parents grew worried. Friends and family began searching for her. That evening, a passerby on the Galloping Goose Trail discovered burned remains. Authorities later confirmed that it was Kimberly. The community was devastated. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched a massive investigation. Cruz and Cameron at first denied involvement, but police were able to gather enough evidence from their online chats, search history, and surveillance to prove the truth. Both boys were arrested in June 2010. In 2011, Cruz Wellwood and Cameron Moffat pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 10 years. Kimberly's family was left heartbroken but determined to honor her memory. They began fighting for a change in the law, called Kimberly's Law, which would help ensure that troubled youth with histories of violence or mental health struggles are given proper care before they can harm others. Although the law has not yet been fully passed, Kimberly's family continues to work hard to make sure no other family has to go through the same pain. Today, Kimberly is remembered as a bright, kind girl who loved animals and deserved a full life. The Craiglist killer couple, Miranda and Elliot Barbour, 2013, Pennsylvania, U.S. Miranda Barbour was born on December 14, 1994, in North Pole, Alaska. When she was only 2 years old, her hips were dislocated, and she had to wear a cast for 2 years. At age 4, she suffered a serious trauma when she and her sister were hurt by their uncle. Her family moved to another town in Alaska, where she started school. She made a few friends, but often had trouble fitting in. By the age of 12, Miranda began spending time with kids who were interested in Satanism. She later claimed she became a high-ranking member of a satanic cult, though this claim was never proven. Around this time, she began using drugs, became violent, and often ran away from home. Her parents struggled to believe her because she mixed reality with fantasy. Miranda was treated for ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression, and schizophrenia. Her behavior grew worse as she got older. She used heroin, lied frequently, and manipulated people. When Miranda was 16, her parents divorced, and she became pregnant. She also had a troubled relationship with her mother, and was later ordered by a court to live with her uncle and his fiancée. While pregnant, Miranda met Elliot Barbour. He was already with another woman who was also pregnant, but he left her and began dating Miranda. Both Miranda and Elliot were interested in Satanism, and they quickly bonded. They got married on October 22, 2013. Even after her marriage, Miranda continued meeting men for money. In November 2013, she answered an ad on Craiglist from a man named Troy LaFerrara, a 42-year-old married man who often paid women for company. Miranda agreed to meet him on November 11, 2013, for $100. But she and Elliot had already decided they wanted to kill someone together, and Troy was their chosen victim. They met Troy in a parking lot. Elliot was hiding under a blanket in the back of Miranda's car. After Troy paid Miranda, they began driving. Miranda gave Elliot a secret signal to attack, but at first he didn't respond. Finally, when they stopped near a property Troy owned, Elliot attacked Troy with a cable, but Troy fought back. Miranda then grabbed a knife and stabbed Troy several times. The couple later dumped his body in an alley. After the murder, they cleaned their car with bleach and paper towels, went to eat hamburgers, and even visited a club. The next day, Troy's body was found. At first, police had no suspects, but phone records soon led them to Miranda and Elliot. Surveillance video also showed them buying cleaning supplies. At first, Miranda denied everything. Later, she said she killed Troy in self-defense, but eventually both she and Elliot confessed. They admitted they killed Troy simply because they wanted to. Both were charged with first-degree murder and later sentenced to life in prison without parole. After her arrest, Miranda claimed she had killed 22 people in different states. Experts believe she made up these stories, as she had a history of lying and exaggerating. Miranda's past shows a long history of trauma, mental illness, and impulsive choices. Combined with Elliot's own mental struggles, the two became a dangerous pair who killed without remorse. Troy LaFerrara, their victim, also had his own destructive patterns. He often looked for women online and used a private property to meet them. This behavior eventually led him into a deadly situation. In the end, all three people in this story, Miranda, Elliot, and Troy, were trapped by destructive choices and desires. Troy lost his life, and Miranda and Elliot lost their freedom forever.